What's going on, Headliner Nation? Welcome back to the Fantasy Headliners. Kyle coming to you from the Draft.com studios. And the name right up above me says it all. 2019 Fantasy Football must have dynamic running backs. What's a dynamic running back? Well, we're going to talk about that today. One of the awesome things about our draft guide, and you got to see a little preview before the episode started. You can get your draft guide, $19.99 at thefantasyheadliners.com. But one of the cool things about our draft guide is this exclusive piece, the dynamic running back rating. And the reason you can't find it anywhere else is because it's a rating that was developed by myself. So you're only going to find it here at the Fantasy Headliners. Now, the one thing that I love about the dynamic running back rating is in fantasy football, we talk about volume so much that I really like to hone on what does a running back do with that volume? What does a running back do with each time he touches the football? Because unless you're touching the football, you can't score points, right? So what are you doing when you touch the football? If you've already bought the draft guide, this information is going to look a little bit familiar, although I'll get a chance to expand on it even more in this video. If you haven't bought the draft guide yet, this is just a small sample size. You're not getting the whole thing here. We're only going to talk about 2 players, and to get the full breakdown, all 32 teams, starting rosters for the 32 teams, paragraph breakdown on what each score means and everything like that, you have to buy the draft guide. But I want you to just see a little bit of that draft guide and why it's one of the best purchases you can make for this season and why you should go get yours right now. So without further ado, before we talk about the players themselves, I need to explain the rating a little bit more in detail for you. So bear with me for just a minute while I explain the rating so throughout the rest of the video, you know what I'm talking about when I discuss these 2 players. I'm going to pop it up on the screen there for you. We've got a couple of different statistic categories that we're looking at. The first category of statistics are volume statistics. So these are the stats that you're going to see every single day. Carries, rushing yards, rushing touchdowns, receptions, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns. Now, all of these things go on a per game basis for volume stats because I want to look at a running back when he's on the field. Yes, running backs are going to get injured. I understand that, and we take that into value. But the thing that this rating does is we want to know how much upside a running back has while he is on the field. So that is what we are looking at, is when a running back is on the field. Now, our other category of statistics called the dynamic statistics, these might be ones that you don't see very often. To take these into account, we have yards after contact per attempt, tackles avoided per attempt, and receiving yards after the catch. Now, these are all on a per attempt basis. So for the volume stats, we're looking on a per game basis. On the dynamic stats, we're looking at a per touch basis. So that's just a little bit of a breakdown of the statistics that are included in it. Again, the main points to this rating is number 1, what does a running back do when he is on the field? And number 2, what does a running back do with each time he touches the football? So that's what we're honing on with these statistics here. And let's talk about the very first player in this video. It's going to be Kerryon Johnson from the Detroit Lions. Now, Kerryon Johnson, we've talked about him a lot in the last couple of weeks, mainly because of Theo Riddick being released. That's basically been the main news recently. So as you can see there's a lot of red under Kerryon Johnson, but with this dynamic running back rating, we're able to look at this and see he could be in for a huge year, and this is why. With the carries, rushing TDs, receptions, yards, receiving TDs, all of those stats were down in the volume category because even though this is a per game basis, on a per game basis last year, Theo Riddick and LeGarrette Blount were stealing touches from Kerryon Johnson, and that's why he is lower in those areas. Now that Theo Riddick is gone, you still see him there showing up. CJ Anderson, I have him there even though he wasn't in 2018 because I want you to see the current running backs. Theo Riddick, we will get him pulled out of there for the newest update, but I wanted to leave him in there so you can see under receptions, he had a score of 79 because on a per game basis, Theo Riddick was making a pretty decent impact in the passing game. Kerryon Johnson only had a score of 58. So there is a large upside for him in the pass game this year, even if his carries were to stay about the same. And we see with his yards there, even though he wasn't getting nearly as many carries, he was being efficient with those carries. He was still putting up volume in the games he was playing because he was efficient with those carries. Now, the one area that I really want to key in on here with Kerryon Johnson and even our next player are those dynamic stats. The yards after contact, the tackles avoided per attempt, the receiving yards after the catch. Kerryon Johnson scored really well in yards after contact per attempt, and then also tackles avoided per attempt and receiving yards after the catch. He scored all right in, could have been a little bit better, but we can see there with those stats on the right-hand side now, yards after catch per attempt, 3.32. That was 8th in the NFL last season. Tackles avoided per attempt, 0.18 tackles avoided per attempt. That was 7th in the NFL last season. And then of running backs that had at least 25 receptions last year, Kerryon Johnson was 15th in yards after the catch per reception. Now, that area obviously can get a little bit better. We would like to see that climb a little bit more and see him be a little bit better with the ball after catching it. But 8.44 is nothing to really scoff at either. About middle of the pack with that. All of these statistics are telling us, number one, with Theo Riddick being gone in the volume statistic area, he's going to see a major boost in receptions. PPR leagues, half PPR leagues, that's very, very critical for you because he's going to make that impact there. And then with those dynamic statistics, the dynamic statistics are telling us that if the volume increases and he stays like that on a per touch basis, that when those volume stats goes up and the dynamic stats, even if they were to stay the same, we're going to see his score there on the right-hand side, the 58 that we saw a minute ago. That's going to start to climb. And he's going to be in for a really big season because when he touches the football, he's average at best, but above average in terms of two of those other categories. So he can do a lot of good things when he touches the football, and that's important. Now, the one thing I do want to mention with this is that I would love for it to all be broken down for you. However, that's what the draft guide is for. So for you to compare Kerryon Johnson to other running backs, that's what that draft guide is going to do for you. It's going to show all of that to you. Where does he compare to other running backs? How do those other running backs look in these statistic areas? And that's why the dynamic running back rating is one thing that when you dig deeper into, you find all of that upside. But again, Kerryon Johnson, because he does so well with the football once he gets it in his hands, all we need is that volume to increase. And it is going to increase for sure in the passing game. And then CJ Anderson, yeah, he's going to make a little bit of an impact on the ground, but it's not going to be that big of an impact. Invest in Kerryon Johnson in 2019 because when he touches the football, he is going to be one of the better running backs in terms of offering you very, very good upside. All right, one more running back to look at in this episode, and basically the same as Kerryon Johnson. Had his coaching staff given him more volume last year on a per-game basis, Aaron Jones would have had a much larger fantasy output. And Aaron Jones from the Green Bay Packers in 2019 is poised to have a much bigger season. Now, he seems to be back on the field, healthy, ready to roll. The Green Bay Packers have been very cautious with him. But if he's the guy like they've been talking about, expect those numbers to go up. Again, this is what this score will do for you. You have to read it and you have to infer some things and you have to think about it. And that's why buying the draft guide is the absolute best thing to do to get more information from this, because you can actually sit and read my breakdowns and look at all of this. But look at the carries. Scored 55 on carries because obviously with Jamal Williams there, Jamal Williams was taking a lot of carries from him. Keep in mind that these numbers aren't going to add up to 100 because it's not based on the team. It's based off everybody in the system. But anyway, with carries 55, Jamal Williams 38, Jamal Williams was taking a decent amount of carries away from Aaron Jones. But when Aaron Jones got those carries with scores of 73 in yards and rushing touchdowns, he was good. He was darn good. In fact, he was one of the league leaders in yards per carry last year. So again, more volume, more yards, more rushing TDs, because he was so good when he did get the football that those numbers are just going to continue to skyrocket. Why Jamal Williams continued to take touches from Aaron Jones is beyond me, though, because when you look at the dynamic statistics over there on the right-hand side, Aaron Jones outdid Jamal Williams. Now, they were really close in receiving yards after the catch, but tackles avoided per attempt, it wasn't even close. And with Aaron Jones, Again, same thing with Kerryon Johnson. I've already mentioned once. When you look at those dynamic statistics and we see how good they were with the football in those areas, we know that if they get more volume and if those were to stay the same, that those numbers, those volume numbers are going to continue to increase because of how good they are with the football when they get it. Aaron Jones, his yards after contact per attempt, 2.97. That was 18th in the league. His tackles avoided per attempt, 0.20 was 6. He was right in front of Kerryon Johnson. And basically the same thing as Kerryon Johnson. Players with at least 25 receptions, yards after the catch per reception, 8.65. That was 9th in the league. When Aaron Jones gets the football, he knows what to do with it. He can produce plays. He can make plays. One thing I love about running backs are those running backs that are going to get me those second chance yards. After you get the football, after somebody hits you, how many more yards can you get me? After you make the catch, how many more yards can you get me? Again, we're fantasy football owners. We're looking for any upside we can possibly get. And with running backs, I want running backs that are going to consistently get me more and more. Because that's all we do. We ask for more, right? Because we want to win fantasy football games. We're asking for more and more. That's what we want from these players when we put them in these lineups. And with Aaron Jones and Kerryon Johnson, you can get that. It's all based off of volume, like I showed you in those numbers. And both of these players are projected to see an increase in that volume. Aaron Jones, I'm not worried about Jamal Williams, and Dexter Williams I do think might cut into his pass catching work a little bit, but as long as Aaron Jones is on the field and healthy, he's going to get the volume, and he's going to get a lot of it. He's going to get much more than he has the last couple of years. Kerryon Johnson doesn't have to worry about Theo Riddick anymore. Theo Riddick had a high score on receptions per game. Now Kerryon Johnson gets to step in and he gets to take those receptions away. And we saw his numbers, receiving yards after the catch, 15th in the league, 8.44. We know if he gets more receptions, those are more second chance yards that he can get on that. CJ Anderson is going to bite into a little bit of those rushing attempts, but that's okay. I think it's more short yardage and goal line stances within the red zone, things like that. Kerryon Johnson is going to get a ton of volume, and so will Aaron Jones. But that's why I want to encourage everyone to not shy away from them on draft day. We've come up with all these excuses on why we are concerned about them, but no matter who you draft in fantasy football, there is always risk involved. Well, if I'm always going to have risk involved, why don't you give me the players that help offset that risk with high upside when they are actually on the field? And that's what Kerryon Johnson and Aaron Jones can do, and that's why you should be taking a look at them in 2019. Again, for the dynamic running back rating, this was just a small little piece. If you already own the draft guide, drop a comment below and let the people know who haven't purchased one yet how awesome this thing is. We have received 2 complaints out of many orders, and the 2 complaints were just, I really wanted a hard copy, not a digital copy. That was it. There's been no complaints about the content so far. So let us know below. Comment below. If you've bought one already, what did you love about it? Was it great content? What do you think about the dynamic running back rating? Let people know why they should also be purchasing it. If you haven't purchased it already, I highly encourage you to do so. I break down all 32 teams with this rating. I break down all the running backs on each team with this rating. I also give you a breakdown, a word-for-word breakdown on my thoughts with the scores, what we see from the scores, what you should be seeing with the scores. And then all that information is right there for you preparing for your draft so you can draft the players with the most upside so you can get the most wins and bring home a fantasy football championship in 2019. Headliner Nation, it's been real. Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode. Get your draft guide, $19.99 at thefantasyheadliners.com. Thanks so much for all of your support. 40,000 strong now on the channel. Thanks so much, Headliner Nation. We really appreciate all of you out there. We will see you on the next episode. Have a good one, everyone.